The story opens with the peaceful Zilani colony ship Serenity's Hope being ambushed by the brutal Korthax Dominion near the edge of known space. Captain Vexli, a veteran explorer, watches helplessly as his people, scientists, families, civilians, are systematically slaughtered. The Korthax are known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty, taking prisoners only to sell as slaves or use in gladiatorial combat. As the ship's systems fail and escape pods are picked off one by one, Vexli makes a desperate decision. Deep in the ship's archives lies an ancient emergency protocol, a frequency and message format used by a long-dead species called humans. According to galactic records, humanity vanished over 800 years ago after their homeworld went silent, during what historians call the Great Silence. With his dying breath, Vexli activates the ancient human distress beacon, broadcasting on frequencies that have been dead for centuries. The message goes out into the void: coordinates, casualties, enemy identification. Then the Serenity's Hope goes dark. Part 2. Echoes of the lost. The distress signal travels through space, bouncing off relay stations and dead satellites. Most civilizations' equipment no longer monitors these ancient frequencies, except for automated systems that have been running, forgotten, for nearly a millennium. Deep in the Sol system, something stirs. Ancient defense satellites, their hulls scarred by centuries of micrometeorite impacts, suddenly come alive. Automated systems that have been in standby mode for 847 years begin their wake-up sequences. The signal reaches Earth's moon, where massive installations buried beneath the lunar surface start powering up for the first time since the Great Silence. Meanwhile, across human space, dozens of star systems thought empty by the galaxy, similar awakenings occur. Massive structures hidden in asteroid fields begin to move. Ships that have been in cold storage for centuries start their pre-flight checks, and in the deepest bunkers of 100 dead worlds, something that the galaxy thought extinct begins to wake up. The humans never died. They simply went to sleep, waiting for the day when someone would call for help using the old codes. Part 3. The Ancient Covenant. Flashback sequences reveal the truth of humanity's disappearance. 47 years ago, humanity had been the galaxy's peacekeepers, not through conquest but through an ancient covenant. Any species that learned their emergency frequencies and protocols would be guaranteed protection, no matter the cost. But the galaxy grew complacent. Wars became rare, and newer species dismissed humanity as myth. Eventually, no one bothered learning the old protocols or monitoring the frequencies, believing their purpose fulfilled and their protection no longer needed. Humanity initiated the Long Sleep, a galaxy-wide hibernation protocol. They left behind automated systems with one simple directive: if anyone, anywhere, sends an SOS using the old human codes, wake everyone up. Now, Admiral Sarah Chen awakens in her command bunker on Luna Base, her cryogenic sleep interrupted after 8 centuries. Around her, thousands of other officers and soldiers are emerging from their pods, their minds quickly brought up to speed by advanced neural interfaces. The Covenant still stands and humanity has work to do. Chen reviews the distress call data. The Zilani are extinct, she can see that from the timestamp. But the Korthax Dominion still exists, and they've grown bold in humanity's absence, enslaving dozens of species across 3 sectors. Wake the fleet, she orders. All of it. Part 4. Steel awakens across human space. The awakening begins in earnest. Ships that are legends even by ancient standards power up from their centuries-long slumber. The Retribution, a dreadnought the size of a small moon. The Eternal Vigil, whose armor plating is made from the compressed matter of dead stars. Carrier groups that can deploy enough firepower to crack planets. But these aren't just ships, they're ecosystems. Each vessel carries not just weapons, but entire populations that have been sleeping. Engineers, doctors, teachers, artists. Humanity doesn't just make war, they make civilization. The Korthax Dominion first notices something is wrong when their border patrols start disappearing. Then their slaving operations go silent. Reports come in of massive ships, designs unknown to current galactic databases, systematically dismantling Korthax infrastructure. Emperor Korthag, supreme ruler of the Dominion, dismisses these reports until one of his commanders brings him visual evidence. A human dreadnought, its hull black with age and space wear, its weapons ports glowing with contained fire. Alongside it, dozens of similar vessels, all broadcasting the same message in the ancient human tongue. By the covenant sworn and the blood spilled, we come. Release the innocent, face judgment, or burn. The galaxy watches in stunned silence as a species thought dead for 8 centuries returns not as explorers or diplomats, but as an army of liberation. Part 5. Fire and Reckoning. The final confrontation takes place at Korth Prime, the heavily fortified capital world of the Korthax Dominion. What should have been an impossible siege becomes a systematic dismantling of centuries of oppression. Humanity doesn't just attack, they liberate. As human forces sweep through Korthax space, they free slave populations, destroy prison worlds, and dismantle the apparatus of tyranny. Species that have been enslaved for generations see the sun for the first time. But the true moment of reckoning comes when Admiral Chen herself boards the Emperor's flagship. Korthag, expecting to face some new species seeking conquest, instead faces a human woman whose eyes have seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "You use the old codes," she tells him simply. "Someone called for help using frequencies that carry a promise 800 years old. The Zilani are gone, but their call still echoes. Their debt is still owed. The Emperor, desperate, offers tribute, territory, negotiation." Chen shakes her head. "The Covenant isn't about conquest or territory," she explains as human boarding parties secure the ship around them. "It's about protection. The innocent called for help, and we answered. The innocent are now safe." "You are not innocent." Epilogue. The new awakening with the Korthax Dominion dismantled and its slaves freed. Humanity faces a choice. The galaxy has grown soft in their absence, but it has also grown in ways they never expected. New species have emerged, new technologies developed, new philosophies born. Admiral Chen stands on the observation deck of Eternal Vigil, watching as human ships disperse throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as protectors returning to their posts. Some will sleep again, waiting for the next call. Others will remain awake, ensuring the frequencies are monitored, the protocols remembered. A young officer approaches, one of the newly awakened, eager for answers about this new galaxy they've inherited. "Admiral," he asks, "what do we do now?" Chen smiles, watching a former slave ship, now crewed by its liberated passengers, disappear into hyperspace toward their long-lost homeworld. "Now, Lieutenant, we make sure the galaxy remembers why the old frequencies were worth monitoring. We make sure that when someone sends an SOS into the dark, something with fire in its heart answers back." The camera pulls back, showing the vast human fleet dispersing across the stars, ancient war steel carrying the promise of protection to a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to be truly safe. Captain Vexeli watched the stars through the bridge window of his ship. The Serenity's Hope moved slowly through space, carrying 3,000 Zilani people to their new home. They had been traveling for 2 years now. Soon they would reach the planet they would call home. Vexeli was old for a Zilani. His blue skin had turned pale with age, and his forearms moved slower than they once did. But his eyes were still sharp. He had seen many things in his long life as a ship captain. "Captain," called his first officer, Tienra, "we are getting strange readings on the long-range sensors." Vexeli turned to look at the displays. Something was moving toward them from behind a large asteroid. No, not something. Many things. His heart began to beat faster. "What are those ships?" he asked. Tienra's voice was quiet and scared. "Korthax Dominion, sir. 12 heavy cruisers and at least 20 smaller attack ships." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Korthax were the most feared warriors in the galaxy. They took slaves and killed anyone who fought back. They enjoyed causing pain and fear. "Send a message to all ships," Vexeli ordered. "Tell them to prepare for battle. Get the children and elderly to the safest parts of the ship." But Vexeli knew it was hopeless. The Serenity's Hope was not a warship. It was built to carry families, not to fight. The other ships in their small group were the same. They had only basic shields and no real weapons. The Korthax ships came closer. Their black hulls looked like metal predators in space. Red lights flashed along their sides where the weapons were charging. "Incoming message from the Korthax flagship," Tienra said. "Put it on the main screen." A huge Korthax warrior appeared on the display. His red eyes glowed with cruel pleasure. Scars covered his gray skin. When he smiled, his sharp teeth looked like knives. "I am War Chief Graktor of the Korthax Dominion," the alien said. His voice was like grinding metal. "You will stop your ships and prepare to be boarded." Your strong ones will become slaves. Your weak ones will die. Your children will be trained to fight in our arenas for sport. We are peaceful colonists, Vexilai replied, trying to keep his voice steady. We have nothing of value to you. Please let us pass. Graktor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your fear has value. Your pain has value. Your lives have value in our slave markets. You have 60 seconds to shut down your engines. The connection ended. Vexilai looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all looking at him, hoping he had an answer. But what could he do? Captain, whispered the communications officer. What are your orders? Before Vexilai could answer, the first Korthax weapons fired. Red beams of death cut through space and hit one of the smaller colony ships. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. 300 Zilani families died in that moment. All ships, run! Vexilai shouted into his communicator. Scatter in different directions. Maybe some of us can escape. But the Korthax ships were faster. One by one they hunted down the fleeing colony ships. Vexilai watched on his screens as ship after ship was destroyed or captured. He heard the screams of his people over the radio before the signals went dead. The Serenity's Hope tried to run too, but a Korthax cruiser caught up with them. Energy beams hit their engines. The ship shook and sparks flew from the control panels. Engines are offline, reported the engineer. Shields are failing. We cannot run anymore. Korthax boarding pods slammed into the ship's hull. Through the security cameras, Vexilai could see gray-skinned warriors cutting through the metal walls with plasma torches. They would be on the bridge soon. Sir, Tyanra said, her voice shaking. Should we send a distress call? To who? Vexilai asked sadly. The nearest government ships are weeks away. The Korthax will be gone with us long before help arrives. Then he remembered something. Long ago, when he was a young officer, his teacher had told him about old emergency codes. They were from a species that used to protect others. But that was just a story from ancient times. Sir, the emergency systems, said the communications officer. There are some very old protocols in the computer. They are marked as inactive, but they still work. Vexilai heard the sound of metal being cut. The Korthax would reach the bridge in minutes. His people were dying all around the ship. But maybe, just maybe, the old stories were true. Show me, he ordered. The officer brought up displays covered in dust and old data. There were codes and frequencies that had not been used for hundreds of years. At the top of the list was a species name that made Vexilai's hearts beat faster. Human Emergency Protocol, he read. Warning, this species may no longer exist. Last contact 847 years ago. The sounds of cutting metal grew closer. Through the ship's speakers, he could hear his people screaming as the Korthax found them. Sir, they are almost through the blast door to this deck, Tyanra reported. Vexilai made his choice. If he was going to die, at least he would die trying to save someone. He activated the old human emergency system. The computer asked for information. He typed in their location, their situation, and the enemy they faced. The system asked, Are you in immediate danger of death or slavery? Yes, Vexilai typed. Sending message on all human emergency frequencies. Message sent. Good luck. The blast door exploded inward. Korthax warriors rushed in, their weapons raised. Graktor himself walked onto the bridge, his red eyes looking at Vexilai with hunger. You fought well for food, Graktor said, but now you belong to us. As the Korthax grabbed him, Vexilai looked at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, his message was flying through space on radio waves that had been silent for centuries. He did not expect an answer. The humans were probably dead like the stories said. But at least he had tried. At least someone would know what happened here. The Serenity's hope went dark, another victim of Korthax cruelty. But in the cold void of space, ancient satellites that had been sleeping for hundreds of years suddenly woke up. Deep in forgotten star systems, old machines began to move. Someone had called for help using the old codes, and something was beginning to answer. The message from Captain Vexilai traveled through space at the speed of light. It bounced from one old satellite to another, following paths that had been built hundreds of years ago. Most of the galaxy no longer watched these old radio frequencies. They thought nothing important traveled on them anymore. But the message kept moving. In the outer rim, an ancient relay station caught the signal. The station was the size of a small moon, covered in metal panels that had turned black from centuries of space dust. It had been drifting alone for so long that most star charts did not even show it anymore. Inside the station, Old computers that had been sleeping suddenly came to life. Lights flickered on in hallways that had been dark for 800 years. The station's main computer read the message and checked it against files that were older than most civilizations. Emergency protocol activated, the computer announced to no one. Human emergency code confirmed. Beginning wake sequence. The station's powerful transmitter, silent for centuries, began to broadcast. The message jumped to another relay, then another, moving deeper into space that the galaxy had forgotten about. On the edge of the Sol system, a small probe the size of a car picked up the signal. The probe had been watching the empty darkness for so long that ice had formed on its metal surface. But now it turned toward the inner planets and began to move. The probe reached Earth's moon after 2 days of travel. The moon looked dead and gray, just like it always had. But hidden under the surface were structures that the galaxy did not know existed. The probe's signal woke them up. Deep underground in caverns carved from solid rock, massive machines began to turn. The sound echoed through tunnels that stretched for hundreds of miles under the moon's surface. Lights came on, showing chambers full of equipment that looked both ancient and incredibly advanced. In the deepest chamber, a woman opened her eyes. Admiral Sarah Chen had been sleeping for 847 years. But to her it felt like she had just closed her eyes a moment ago. The cryogenic sleep chamber had kept her body and mind perfectly preserved, waiting for this day. She sat up slowly, her muscles stiff from the long sleep. Around her, thousands of other chambers were opening. Men and women in military uniforms were waking up, all looking confused and alert at the same time. "Status report," Sarah said. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried the authority of someone used to command. A young lieutenant stumbled over to her, still shaky from his own awakening. "Admiral, the emergency protocols have been triggered. We have an SOS signal using the old human codes." Sarah stood up and walked to a computer terminal. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, calling up information that had been stored while she slept. The news was not good. "The Zilani colony fleet," she read. "Destroyed by Korthax Dominion forces. All ships lost, all lives lost." She paused, reading more. "The message was sent 3 days ago." 3 days, the lieutenant repeated. "Admiral, they are already dead." Sarah's face was hard as stone. She had seen too much war, too much death to be surprised by cruelty. But the old promise still held. "The Covenant says nothing about arriving in time, Lieutenant," she said. "It says we answer the call. It says we protect the innocent. The Zilani who died were innocent. The Korthax who killed them are not." She walked to the main command center where more officers were gathering. Through the windows, she could see Earth in the distance, blue and green and beautiful. It looked exactly the same as when she had gone to sleep. "Communications," she called out. "Send the wake signal to all human systems. Full activation. Tell them we have work to do." The communications officer, a gray-haired woman named Captain Torres, nodded and began working at her station. "Sending wake signals now, Admiral. All frequencies, all systems." Across human space, the wake signals reached their targets. In the Alpha Centauri system, a massive shipyard that looked like a dead asteroid suddenly came alive. Lights flickered on inside what appeared to be solid rock, revealing construction bays that held ships bigger than most space stations. Near Proxima Centauri, a fleet of warships that had been powered down for centuries began their startup sequences. These were not the sleek, elegant ships that most species built. They were built like fortresses that could fly. Their armor was thick and scarred from old battles. Their weapons were designed to end fights quickly and permanently. In the Wolf 359 system, massive carriers that looked like flying cities powered up their engines. Each one carried not just fighter craft but entire armies of soldiers who had been sleeping in cryogenic chambers. They were waking up now, checking their weapons, reading reports about what had happened while they slept. Admiral Chen watched the reports come in from across human space. 30 star systems were waking up. Fleets that had been legends even in the old days were preparing for battle. Millions of soldiers, sailors, and support staff were emerging from their long sleep. "Admiral," Captain Torres said, "we are getting responses from all wake signals. Full fleet activation in progress. Estimated time to combat readiness 18 hours. How long to reach Korthax space?" Sarah asked. 4 days at maximum speed, Admiral." "But sir, the Zilani are already dead." Sarah turned to look at the display showing Korthax territory. It was huge, covering dozens of star systems. Red markers showed slave worlds, prison planets, and military bases. The Korthax had grown strong while humanity slept. Torres, send a message to all fleet commanders, Sarah ordered. Tell them to review the current galactic situation. The Korthax Dominion has been busy while we were asleep. They have enslaved 17 different species. They run gladiator games using prisoners of war. They sell children in slave markets. She paused, her hands clasped behind her back. Tell the commanders that someone used the old codes to call for help. The Zilani are dead, but their call still echoes. We failed to save them, but we can still honor them, and we can make sure this never happens again. Throughout human space, the ancient war machine was waking up. Ships that were myths began to move. The Retribution, a dreadnought so large it had its own gravity, powered up its engines. The Eternal Vigil, whose armor was made from compressed neutron star material, began charging its weapons. Carrier groups that could destroy entire fleets prepared to leave their hidden bases. But these were not just ships of war. They carried doctors, teachers, engineers, and artists. When humans went to battle, they brought civilization with them. They did not just conquer. They liberated. They built. They protected. On Luna Base, Admiral Chen stood before a massive display showing the entire galaxy. Red dots showed Korthax territory. Blue dots showed human fleets moving into position. The galaxy forgot about us, she said to her staff. They stopped monitoring the old frequencies. They thought we were just stories from ancient times. But the promise still stands. When someone calls for help using the old codes, we answer. She touched a control and the display zoomed in on Korthax space. They are about to remember why the old frequencies were worth watching. They are about to remember why their ancestors slept better, knowing humans were listening in the dark. The first human ships began jumping to hyperspace, carrying fire and justice toward an enemy that thought itself safe. The ancient war steel was moving again. Admiral Sarah Chen walked through the halls of Luna Base, past walls covered with old pictures and documents. She stopped before a display case that held a piece of metal no bigger than her hand. The metal was dark and twisted, scarred by weapons fire. A small sign read, "Fragment from UES Defender, lost at the Battle of Kepler Station, 1847 Human Calendar. 800 years, she said to Captain Torres, who had followed her. Has it really been that long? Torres nodded. The galaxy has changed a lot while we slept, Admiral. New species have risen. Old ones have fallen. Technologies we never dreamed of have been invented. Sarah touched the glass covering the metal fragment. But some things never change. There are still predators. There are still innocent people who need protection. She turned away from the display and continued walking. They passed through sections of the base that were like museums, filled with the history of humanity's role as the galaxy's protectors. Tell me about the Covenant, Torres said. The younger officers who just woke up, they do not remember the details. They know we are supposed to protect people, but they do not know why. Sarah stopped walking. For a moment she looked older than her years, carrying the weight of centuries of promise. It started during the Vegan crisis. She began. That was almost 1,000 years ago. The Vegans were a peaceful people, much like the Zilani. They had built beautiful cities on 12 worlds. They made art and music that could make you cry just to experience it. They walked past a holographic display showing a planet covered in crystal, spires and floating gardens. Then, the hegemony found them, Sarah continued. The hegemony was like the Korthax in many ways. They believed that might made right. They conquered the Vegan worlds in 3 days. They enslaved the entire population and destroyed everything beautiful the Vegans had made. Torres had heard this story before, but she listened carefully. Every human child learned about the Vegan crisis. The galaxy did nothing, Sarah said. The other species said it was not their business. They said the strong had always conquered the weak. That was just how the universe worked. They reached the base's main historical chamber. Here, the walls were covered with the names of every species humanity had protected over the centuries. There were thousands of names written in hundreds of different languages. But humanity said no, Sarah continued. We were still young then, still new to space. But we looked at what happened to the Vegans and we decided that some things were worth fighting for. A holographic projector activated, showing scenes from the liberation of Vega. Human ships, smaller and less advanced than what they would become, fought desperately against the hegemony fleets. The battles were fierce and costly. We lost 60,000 people liberating the Vegan worlds, Sarah said quietly. But we saved 8 million Vegans from slavery. When it was over, we made a promise. The hologram changed, showing representatives from dozens of species gathered in a great hall. At the center stood a human woman in a military uniform. That was Admiral Elena Vasquez, Torres said, the first Covenant admiral. She stood before the Galactic Council and made an offer, Sarah said. Humanity would become the galaxy's protectors. Any species that learned our emergency codes could call for help, no matter how far away, no matter how dangerous the enemy, no matter what the cost. The hologram showed Admiral Vasquez speaking, her voice carrying across the centuries. We offer this covenant freely. We ask for nothing in return except that you remember. Remember that when the darkness comes, when the predators hunt, when evil thinks itself unopposed, you can call out using our codes. And no matter where we are, no matter how long it has been, we will answer. Sarah and Torres watched as representatives from hundreds of species stepped forward to learn the human emergency protocols. They watched as the promise was carved in stone and metal and energy, recorded in every language and stored in every archive. For 300 years we kept that promise, Sarah said. We fought wars that were not our wars. We saved species we had never met. We lost ships and people to protect strangers who lived on the other side of the galaxy. The hologram showed montage of battles and rescues. Human ships arriving just in time to save colonies from raiders. Human soldiers fighting beside alien allies against impossible odds. Human doctors working to heal the victims of wars they had not started. And it worked, Torres said. The galaxy became safer. Pirates and slavers learned to fear the human response. Species that might have become conquerors decided it was not worth the risk. Yes, Sarah agreed. But then something unexpected happened. We succeeded too well. The hologram changed again, showing a peaceful galaxy. Trade fleets moved safely between systems. Colonies grew without fear. Children of a dozen species played together in parks on distant worlds. The galaxy became so safe that people forgot why it was safe, Sarah explained. New species rose up that had never known the old dangers. They did not learn the human codes because they did not think they would ever need them. The older species stopped teaching their children about the Covenant because it seemed like ancient history. Torres nodded sadly. And so when the calls for help stopped coming, we thought our job was done, Sarah finished. The Galactic Council voted to release us from the Covenant. They said humanity had earned its rest. They thanked us for our service and told us we could go home. The hologram showed the ceremony where the Covenant was officially ended. Representatives from across the galaxy praised humanity's sacrifice and declared that they could now protect themselves. But we knew better, Sarah said. We had seen what the galaxy was like without protectors. We knew that evil never truly dies. It just waits for the Guardians to look away. They moved to another display, this one showing the construction of the great sleep chambers and hidden fleets. So we made a new promise, Sarah said. We would go to sleep, but we would leave systems watching. If anyone, anywhere, used the old codes to call for help, we would wake up. The Covenant would continue, even if the galaxy had forgotten about it. Torres looked at the display showing Admiral Chen's own sleep chamber. 847 years. Did you ever think it would be so long? I hoped it would be forever, Sarah admitted. I hoped the galaxy would stay peaceful and safe, and we could sleep until the stars burned out. But I knew that someday someone would need us again. She turned to look at Torres directly, and here we are. The Zilani called for help using codes that are older than most civilizations. They are dead, but their call still echoes. The Covenant still stands. A young officer approached them, saluting quickly. Admiral, the fleets are ready to move out. All commanders are requesting orders, Sarah nodded. Tell them to remember their history, Lieutenant. Tell them to remember why we made the promise in the first place. The Zilani died because no one else was listening, because no one else remembered. She looked back at the wall covered with the names of species they had protected. But we remembered. We kept the promise. And now the Korthax are going to learn what happens when someone hurts the innocent while humanity is watching. The lieutenant saluted again and ran off to deliver the orders. Sarah and Torres stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the history of 8 centuries of protection. The galaxy forgot about us, Torres said. But we never forgot about them. Sarah smiled grimly. They are about to remember why their ancestors taught them our emergency codes. They are about to remember what it means to have humanity as their guardian. She walked toward the command center, where the greatest fleet in human history was waiting for her orders. The ancient promise would be kept, the Covenant would be honored, and the galaxy would learn once again that some calls for help never go unanswered. The first sign that something had changed came to Border Station Kresh. a Korthax military outpost on the edge of their territory. Commander Theknal was reviewing slave transport schedules when his communications officer rushed into his office. "Sir, we have lost contact with Patrol Group 7, the officer reported, his gray skin pale with worry. Theknal looked up from his paperwork with annoyance. "Equipment failure?" "Unknown, sir. They were investigating reports of strange ships near the outer reach. That was 6 hours ago. We have heard nothing since." "Send Patrol Group 3 to investigate," Theknal ordered, "and have them take extra communications equipment. I do not want to lose another patrol to mechanical problems." But Patrol Group 3 never returned either, nor did the search and rescue ship sent after them. Across Korthax space, similar reports were coming in. Ships were disappearing near the outer borders. Mining stations went silent. Slave transport convoys vanished without sending so much as a distress signal. At first, the Korthax commanders thought they were dealing with pirates or rebels. Such things happen sometimes. A few missing ships were not worth worrying about. But then slave world Korth 7 went completely dark. The world held 2 million prisoners from a dozen different species. They worked in mines that dug precious metals from deep underground. The planet was surrounded by defense satellites and patrol ships. It should have been impossible to attack without warning. Yet when the relief supply convoy arrived, they found empty space where the orbital defenses should have been. The satellites were gone. The patrol ships were gone. Even the automated warning beacons had been removed. "What happened here?" demanded Captain Vorkan, commander of the supply convoy. His sensor officer was staring at his instruments in confusion. "Sir, I am reading life signs on the planet. Millions of them. But no Korthax signatures. The slave population appears to be free." "Free?" Vorkan snarled. "Slaves do not become free. Someone freed them. Find out who." As his ships moved closer to the planet, they began picking up transmissions. But these were not the cries of despair they expected to hear from a slave world. These were songs, celebrations, voices speaking in languages that had not been heard on that world for generations. "Captain," his communications officer said quietly, "we are being scanned." "By who?" "Where are the scanners?" The officer pointed at his display, but his hand was shaking. "Sir, there is a ship directly above us. It is very large." Vorkan looked up through the bridge windows. At first he saw only stars. Then something moved, and he realized that what he had thought was empty space was actually the hull of a ship so massive that his mind had trouble understanding its size. The ship was black as the void between stars. Its armor plating was scarred and pitted with age, marked by battles fought centuries ago. Weapon ports glowed with barely contained energy, and along its hull, in letters larger than most buildings, was written a single word in an alphabet that Vorkan did not recognize. "Retribution." "Captain," his communications officer whispered, "we are receiving a transmission." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human woman in a military uniform. Her hair was gray and her face was marked by years of command. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force. You are in violation of Galactic Protection Protocol 7. You have enslaved sentient beings. You have committed acts of cruelty against non-combatants. By the authority of the Ancient Covenant, you are ordered to surrender immediately." Vorkan stared at the screen. Humans were myths, stories told to frighten young warriors. They had been extinct for hundreds of years. You are not real," he stammered. Admiral Chen's expression did not change. "The 2 million beings you held as slaves on this world would disagree with that assessment. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." "Never!" Vorkan roared, his warrior instincts finally overcoming his shock. "All ships, attack! Destroy this pretender!" The Korthax ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around the massive human vessel. For a moment, the darkness was lit up like a deadly fireworks display. When the light faded, the human ship was still there. Its shields had absorbed the attack without visible damage. Admiral Chen was still on the screen, and now she looked disappointed. "You chose violence," she said simply. "Very well." The Retribution fired once. A single beam of energy that seemed to tear reality itself lanced out from the massive ship. It hit the Korthax flagship in the center, cutting it cleanly in half. The other ships fled in panic, broadcasting warnings about ghost ships and impossible weapons. Similar scenes were playing out across Korthax space. Ancient human warships were emerging from hyperspace near slave worlds and military bases. They moved with deadly purpose, their crews working with the efficiency that came from centuries of experience. The Eternal Vigil appeared at Korth 12, where gladiatorial games used prisoners as entertainment. The ship's commander did not waste time with warnings. The arena where sentient beings were forced to fight for sport was reduced to molten metal within minutes. The freed prisoners were taken aboard human medical ships for treatment. The carrier group Phoenix Wing struck at the Korthax Military Academy, where young warriors learned to enjoy causing pain. The academy was evacuated before it was destroyed, but every lesson plan and training manual was confiscated. The Korthax would have to learn to fight without learning to torture. Across 3 star systems, the pattern was the same. Human ships would arrive without warning. They would free any prisoners they found. They would destroy anything used to cause suffering. Then they would disappear as quickly as they had come, leaving behind only freed slaves and burning wreckage. Emperor Korthag, supreme ruler of the Dominion, watched the reports with growing rage from his fortress world of Korth Prime. His generals cowered before him as ship after ship reported the same impossible story. "Humans," he snarled. "You tell me that extinct creatures are destroying my empire?" General Kreshta, his most trusted military advisor, tried to explain. "My emperor, the ships are real. The weapons are real. Our forces cannot stand against them. Perhaps we should consider negotiation." Korthag's massive fist slammed down on his command table, cracking the metal surface. "We do not negotiate. We are the Korthax. We take what we want and destroy what opposes us." "But sir," another general said carefully, "they have already freed 17 slave worlds. They have destroyed 43 military installations. Our entire outer defense network is gone. Then we will show them what happens when they challenge the Dominion." Korthag roared. "Send word to all fleets, every ship, every warrior, every weapon we have. Bring them all to Korth Prime. Let these humans come. We will be waiting." But even as he gave the order, another report arrived. The prison world of Korth 23 had been liberated. The weapons testing facility at Korth 45 had been destroyed. The slave markets of the Kresh system had been shut down permanently, and with each report came the same message from the human ships. "By the covenant sworn and the blood spilled, we come. Release the innocent, face judgment, or burn." Emperor Korthag stood at the window of his throne room, looking out at the fleet gathering around his world. Thousands of Korthax ships filled the space around Korth Prime. It was the largest military force in the galaxy. "Let them come," he whispered. "We will show them that the Korthax do not fear ghosts from the past." But deep in his heart, for the first time in his life, the Emperor of the Korthax Dominion felt something he had never experienced before. He felt fear. In the darkness between the stars, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as human fleets moved into position around Korth Prime. The final battle was about to begin. "Admiral," Captain Torres reported, "all fleets are in position. We have over 300 capital ships ready for assault." Sarah Chen nodded. "And the Korthax?" "Approximately 4,000 ships defending the capital. They have gathered everything they have." "Good," Admiral Chen said quietly. "Then when this is over, they will have nothing left with which to harm the innocent." She looked at the tactical display showing the massive Korthax fleet surrounding their homeworld. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Begin the final assault. Show them what happens when someone ignores a call for help sent on the old frequencies." The ancient war steel moved forward, carrying 8 centuries of promise toward its fulfillment. The battle for Korth Prime began at dawn, though the planet's 3 suns were hidden behind the massive fleets that filled the sky. Emperor Korthag stood in his fortress tower, watching 4,000 Korthax warships take their positions around his world. "They cannot defeat us," he told himself. "Nothing can defeat the combined might of the Dominion." But when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, even the Emperor felt his confidence shake. The ships that appeared were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were huge beyond belief, their dark hulls scarred by battles fought across centuries. They moved with the slow, terrible purpose of predators that had never known defeat. "Sir," his communications officer said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the enemy fleet is hailing us." Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the main screen of the Emperor's command center. She stood calmly on her bridge, surrounded by officers who looked like they had been born for war. "Emperor Korthag," she said, "I am Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Force. By the ancient covenant and the blood of the innocent, I call upon you to surrender. Your crimes against sentient life end today." Korthag laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Human, you face the greatest fleet ever assembled. You have perhaps 300 ships. I have 4,000. Do you think you can win with such poor odds?" Admiral Chen's expression never changed. "Emperor, you misunderstand the situation. You are not facing 300 ships. You are facing humanity's promise made solid and given form. You are facing 8 centuries of protection, come to collect what is owed." "Enough talk," Korthag roared. "All ships, attack! Show these ghosts what Korthag's steel can do." The Korthag's fleet opened fire as one. 4,000 ships unleashed everything they had at the human formation. The space between the fleets lit up with energy beams, missiles, and plasma torpedoes. It was the largest weapons barrage in galactic history, but the human ships did not die. Their shields absorbed the incoming fire like it was gentle rain. Their armor, forged in the fires of 100 ancient wars, showed barely a scratch, and when they fired back, reality itself seemed to bend around their weapons. The Retribution spoke first, its main guns turning a Korthag's dreadnought into expanding gas and debris. The Eternal Vigil followed, its neutron beam cutting through 3 enemy ships at once. All along the human line, weapons that had been legends even in the old days began their deadly work. "Impossible," Korthag whispered, watching his ships die by the dozens. "Our intelligence said humans were extinct. Where did they get such power?" His science advisor, a thin Korthax named Vektal, was studying the sensor readings with growing horror. "Sir, I am analyzing the composition of their armor plating. These ships, some of them are over 1,000 years old. That cannot be right. The metal shows signs of age, but it has been maintained perfectly. Sir, these ships have been fighting longer than our civilization has existed." On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Chen watched the battle with the calm of someone who had seen it all before. This was not her first fleet action. It was not even her 100th. She and her officers had been fighting for longer than most species had been traveling between the stars. "Admiral," Captain Torres reported, "enemy casualties are at 60% and rising. Our losses, 0. What is the status of the planetary defense grid?" "Disabled, sir. Marine assault teams have secured all orbital fortresses." "The planet is defenseless." Admiral Chen nodded. "Signal the fleet. Begin landing operations. Priority targets are all prison facilities, slave compounds, and government centers. Rules of engagement. Any Korthax who surrenders is to be treated according to galactic law. Any who continue fighting are to be stopped by whatever means necessary." Across the planet below, human dropships began their descent. These were not the sleek, fast vessels that most species used for planetary assault. These were flying fortresses designed to land in the middle of enemy fire and disgorge entire battalions of soldiers. The Korthax ground forces tried to resist, but it was hopeless. Human soldiers fought with the discipline and skill that came from centuries of experience. Their weapons and armor were works of art, crafted by civilizations that had forgotten more about warfare than most species would ever learn. But more than that, they fought with purpose. Each human soldier knew why they were there. They were keeping a promise made 800 years ago. They were answering a call for help that had echoed across the galaxy. They were protecting the innocent, just as humanity had always done. In the Emperor's fortress, Korthag watched his empire crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from across his territory. Every slave world had been liberated. Every prison camp had been emptied. Every weapon of oppression had been destroyed. "Sir," his chief of staff said quietly, "the humans have breached the outer defenses. They will be here soon." Korthag drew his ceremonial sword, a blade that had tasted the blood of 100 conquered enemies. "Then we will meet them like warriors. We will not surrender to myths and legends." But even as he spoke, he could hear the sound of explosions getting closer. The human soldiers were working their way through his fortress, methodically clearing each level. They did not hurry. They did not need to. They had all the time in the universe. The throne room doors exploded inward, and human soldiers in power armor advanced through the smoke. They moved with perfect coordination, their weapons trained on every corner of the room. Behind them walked Admiral Sarah Chen, her uniform clean and pressed despite the battle raging around them. She looked at Emperor Korthag with the same calm expression she had worn during their communication. He raised his sword ready for a final battle, but she merely shook her head. "Emperor," she said, "your sword has no power here. Your threats have no meaning. You are finished." "I am Korthag the Conqueror," he roared. "I have enslaved a dozen species. I have built an empire that spans the stars. You built it on the backs of the innocent," Admiral Chen replied. "You ruled through fear and pain. You forgot that someone might be watching. Someone might be listening when your victims called for help." She gestured to the tactical display that still showed the battle overhead. The Korthak's fleet was gone. Human ships hung in orbit like silent judges. "The Zalani colony ship sent a distress signal 3 days ago," she continued. "They used codes that your civilization had forgotten. Codes that carried a promise from the dawn of galactic civilization." Korthag's sword wavered in his hands. "The Zalani are dead." "You are too late." "Yes," Admiral Chen agreed. "We were too late to save them. But we are not too late to ensure that no one else dies as they did. We are not too late to honor their memory by ending the evil that killed them." She stepped closer to the fallen emperor. "You used the old codes to call for help," Captain Vexilai said in his message. He was wrong. The codes are not for calling for help. They are for calling down justice. Through the broken windows of the throne room, they could see human ships descending toward the planet's surface. But these were not warships. These were colony vessels, medical ships, and construction platforms. What are you doing?" Korthag asked. "What we have always done," Admiral Chen replied. "We do not just destroy, Emperor. We build, we heal, we teach. Your slaves are free now, but freedom means nothing without hope. So we will help them build new lives. We will teach them to defend themselves. We will make sure that when we go back to sleep, they will not be defenseless." She turned to her soldiers. "Take him to the holding cells. He will face trial for his crimes, but first he will watch as we undo everything he built." As the soldiers led Korthag away, he looked back at Admiral Chen. "You cannot stay forever, human. When you leave, others will rise to take my place." Admiral Chen smiled for the first time since waking from her long sleep. "Perhaps. But now they will know that someone is watching. Now they will know that the old codes still work. And when the innocent call for help, we will answer." Across Korthak space, the work of liberation continued. Former slaves were given medical treatment and counseling. Destroyed worlds were helped to rebuild. The apparatus of oppression was dismantled piece by piece, and in the deepest archives of 100 worlds, human technicians installed new emergency beacons. The old frequencies would be monitored again. The ancient codes would be remembered. 3 months later, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, watching as the last human ships prepared to return to their hidden bases. The work was done. The Korthak's empire was no more. The innocent were free. "Admiral," Captain Torres said, joining her at the window, "the fleet commanders are asking for orders. Do we return to the sleep chambers?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Below them, former slave worlds were already showing signs of new life. Children who had never known freedom were playing in streets that had once echoed with the march of oppressors. "Some of us will sleep," she finally said, "but not all. The galaxy forgot about us once. We cannot let that happen again. Some ships will remain awake, patrolling the dark spaces between the stars. Some soldiers will stand guard while others rest." She turned from the window to look at Torres. "And the frequencies will be monitored always." "The promise stands, Captain. When someone calls for help using the old codes, humanity will answer." Torres nodded. "And if no one calls?" Admiral Chen smiled. "Then we will know we have done our job. We will know that the innocent sleep safely because predators fear the sound of human ships in the night." The Retribution turned away from the liberated world and began its journey back to human space. But as it traveled, it left behind something more valuable than weapons or technology. It left behind hope, and the knowledge that somewhere in the dark between the stars, ancient guardians were still keeping their promise. The galaxy would not forget again.